2 months ago, the timeline of human history changed, not by a little, by 350,000 years. For decades, the oldest confirmed evidence of humans deliberately making fire came from a site in northern France, dated to about 50,000 years ago. That number sat in textbooks, in documentaries, in every history of human progress infographic. 50,000 years. That was a starting line. Then, in December 2025, a team from the British Museum published a paper that moved the starting line back by 350,000 years. Not humans had fire, rewrote. Humans made fire on purpose, repeatedly, at a single site in what is now Suffolk, England, 400,000 years ago, before modern humans even existed. One of the lead researchers, who has spent 40 years digging up the past, called it the most exciting discovery of his career. Here's what they found, and why it matters more than just a bigger number. This is the part I find genuinely amazing. Fire doesn't leave a signature. Ash blows away, charcoal crumbles, and wildfires happen naturally all the time. So how do you tell the difference between lightning struck a tree here once and someone built a hearth here again and again on purpose? The team spent 4 years answering exactly that question. First, they found a patch of clay that had been baked not once, but repeatedly in the same spot. Geochemical testing showed it had been heated to over 700 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to crack stone. Which brings us to the second clue, flint hand axes, found right at the site, fractured by that same intense heat. Tools, deliberately or accidentally left near a fire hot enough to damage them. But the third clue is the one that seals it. Buried in the same layer, the team found two small fragments of a mineral called iron pyrite. You might know it by its nickname, Abao Fool's Gold. Pyrite has a special property. Strike it against flint, and it throws off a spark hot enough to start a fire. Here's the catch. Pyrite doesn't naturally occur anywhere near this site. Someone had to find it somewhere else and carry it here, on purpose. A repeatedly used hearth, heat-cracked tools, and a fire-starting kit that had to be carried in from elsewhere. Put those three things together and you don't get a coincidence. You get evidence of people sitting at this exact spot 400,000 years ago making fire. Here's the detail that makes this even more interesting. 400,000 years ago, modern humans, Homo sapiens, didn't exist yet. The people who built this hearth were early Neanderthals. For a long time, Neanderthal was basically shorthand for primitive, slow, brutish, not quite as smart as us. This discovery is part of a much larger pile of evidence that's been quietly demolishing that idea for years. Researchers studying the fossils from this period note that the brain sizes of these early humans were approaching the size of brains today, right around the same time fire-making shows up in the archaeological record across Britain and Europe. That's probably not a coincidence. Here's why fire and bigger brains might be connected. Cooked food is easier to digest than raw food, Your body spends less energy breaking it down, which means more energy is available for everything else, including growing and running an energy-hungry brain. Fire doesn't just mean warmth. It might be one of the reasons human brains got as big as they did in the first place. And there's a second effect that's just as important, maybe more so. Once you have a fire, you have a reason to sit still after dark. A fire is light, it's warmth, it's protection from predators, and it's also the first thing in human history that people could gather around. Evenings by a hearth meant time to talk, to plan, to tell each other things. Some researchers think this is where the foundations of language and more complex social groups began. Not in daylight, hunting, in the evening, around a fire, with nothing else to do but talk. Now, here's where I want to be straight with you, because this is genuinely how science works, and it's part of what makes this interesting. Not every expert is fully convinced this counts as the earliest evidence of fire making. One researcher who works on similar sites pointed out that later Neanderthal sites, the ones dated to around 50,000 years, the old record holder, have a very specific kind of evidence. Stone tools with wear patterns that clearly show they were struck against pyrite again and again. A smoking gun, in his words. The Barnum site, he noted, doesn't have that exact piece of evidence, and he suggested the team might be stretching things slightly by calling it the definitive earliest. The researchers behind the discovery acknowledged this. Proving someone lit a fire on purpose 400,000 years ago using only baked clay, cracked tools, and 2 pebbles of pyrite is about as close to case closed as ancient evidence ever gets. but it's not a video recording. It's a very strong case built from indirect clues. And that's actually the honest state of this whole field right now. The oldest evidence of fire use in general, rewrote, not necessarily fire making, rewrote, goes back even further, to sites in Africa that are 800,000 years old or more. But there's a difference between fire existed nearby and a person struck a spark and built this. The Barnum site is one of the strongest cases ever found for the second one. Whether it's the earliest or just one of the earliest is still being debated, and that debate is exactly how the timeline keeps getting refined. Here's what I love about this story. It's not really a story about the past, it's a story about right now. Somewhere, today, archaeologists are still digging at sites like Barnum Aglaruyu, sites that have been excavated for decades that people assumed had already given up their secrets. And every so often, a tiny fragment of pyrite, smaller than a coin, buried for hundreds of thousands of years, gets pulled out of the dirt and rewrites a number that's been in textbooks for generations. The history of the first fire isn't a fixed fact sitting in a book somewhere. It's a number that keeps moving every time someone digs a little deeper or looks a little closer. 40 years ago, the record was different. Today, it's 400,000 years. In 10 years, it might be different again. And somewhere in that number, Adruaru, 400,000 years ago, give or take, Adruaru is the moment some of our ancestors, who weren't even fully human yet, sat down together around a light they had made themselves for the very first time. Everything that came after Abablo, cooking, language, gathering in groups after dark, Awario, that all had to start somewhere. Maybe it started here. If you like digging into a discovery that just happened, here's another one. Audioio, because it turns out around 41,000 years ago, something happened to the sky itself that may have given one group of ancient humans the tools to survive, and may have helped doom another. I'll see you there.